the sun was setting over the sprawling cityscape of Valtoria, casting long shadows across the metallic structures that reached for the sky. Edward Guinness stood on the balcony of his modest apartment, gazing out at the horizon with a heavy heart. His mind was a turbulent sea of memories, each wave crashing against the shore of his consciousness with relentless force. He could still hear Alice's laughter, see her bright eyes filled with dreams of a future that was cruelly snatched away. The news of her murder had been a devastating blow, leaving him hollow and adrift in a universe that suddenly felt cold and unforgiving. The official report labeled it an unfortunate accident, a diplomatic incident gone wrong, but Edward knew better. His instincts, honed by years of service, screamed of foul play, of a cover-up that ran deep within the Empire's political machinery. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Edward's resolve hardened. He would not rest until he uncovered the truth and brought those responsible to justice. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but fear was a luxury he could no longer afford. He turned away from the view, stepping back into the dimly lit room where a holographic image of Alice flickered gently on his desk. "Forgive me, Alice," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city below. "I promise I'll make them pay." His plan was simple yet perilous: infiltrate the heart of the Empire's bureaucracy, gather evidence, and expose the conspiracy. But first, he needed allies, those who shared his thirst for justice and were willing to risk everything for the cause. Edward's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from his communicator. The message was from an old comrade, someone he hadn't spoken to in years but who might be willing to help. The message was brief, yet it carried the weight of hope: "Meet me at the usual place." Midnight. He glanced at the clock. There was time to prepare, to arm himself with the tools necessary for the task ahead. He opened a hidden compartment in his desk, revealing an array of weapons and gadgets from his Special Forces days. Each piece was a reminder of his past life, a life he had left behind but was now forced to reclaim. As he meticulously checked each item, his mind drifted to the challenges that awaited him. The alien diplomat's world was one of opulence and deceit, where power was wielded with ruthless efficiency. Navigating this treacherous landscape would require more than just skill; it would demand every ounce of his cunning and resilience. With his preparations complete, Edward donned his combat gear, the familiar weight of the armor a comforting presence. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. There was no turning back now; the path of vengeance was set, and he would follow it to the end. As he left the apartment, the city's neon lights flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the streets. Edward moved with purpose, Edward's thoughts whirled with possibilities. The archives of Zenthara could hold the key to unraveling the conspiracy, but reaching them would be no easy task. The planet was under tight imperial control, its access restricted to only the most privileged members of society. Yet, the promise of answers was too compelling to ignore. He knew he couldn't do this alone. The journey to Zenthara would require resources, allies, and a plan that accounted for every possible obstacle. But before he could act, he needed to meet his contact and assess the situation. Trust was a scarce commodity, but he would have to gamble on the hope that not everyone was complicit in the Empire's web of deceit. With renewed determination, Edward turned towards the bar, the message still lingering in his thoughts. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he was driven by a singular purpose: to uncover the truth and bring justice to those who had wronged him and his daughter. Inside the bar, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and the murmur of low conversations. Edward's eyes adjusted to the dim light as he scanned the room, searching for a familiar face among the patrons. He moved with calculated ease, his senses attuned to any sign of danger. As he approached a secluded corner, a figure emerged from the shadows, their features obscured by a hooded cloak. Edward's hand instinctively moved towards his weapon, but the figure raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "Commander Guinness," the figure said, their voice a hushed whisper. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show." Edward nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the stranger. "I didn't come here for pleasantries. What do you have for me?" The figure leaned closer, their voice barely audible above the din. "Information. A way to reach Zenthara undetected. But it won't be easy, and it won't be cheap." Edward's mind raced as he considered the offer. The stakes were high, but the promise of answers was worth the risk. He knew he had to tread carefully, to weigh each decision with the utmost care. As the conversation continued, Edward felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him, the burden of his quest growing heavier with each passing moment. But he was resolute, driven by a fierce determination to see his mission through to the end. The air in the bar seemed to thicken with tension as Edward continued his conversation with the hooded figure. The dimly lit room, filled with the murmurs of patrons and the clinking of glasses, suddenly felt charged with an unseen energy. Edward's instinct screamed a warning, a sense that something was about to go terribly wrong. Before he could fully process the sensation, the hooded figure's demeanor shifted. With a swift, fluid motion, they drew a laser sword from beneath their cloak, the blade igniting with a brilliant, humming glow. The sudden betrayal sent a jolt of adrenaline through Edward's system, his reflexes honed by years of combat experience kicking into high gear. The patrons around them scattered, chairs toppling and drinks spilling as chaos erupted. Edward's hand flew to his sidearm, drawing it with practiced precision as he faced the unexpected threat. The figure lunged at him, the laser sword slicing through the air with lethal intent. Edward sidestepped the attack, his movements a dance of survival as he fired a warning shot, the energy bolt sizzling past the figure's shoulder. "Stand down," he barked, his voice commanding and unwavering. The figure hesitated for a split second, their eyes, now visible beneath the hood, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. But the pause was fleeting, and they pressed the attack, their strikes precise and relentless. Edward's mind raced as he parried each blow, searching for a way to end the confrontation without unnecessary bloodshed. The figure's skill with the laser sword was formidable, but Edward's years of experience gave him an edge. He could see the slight tremor in their hands, the telltale sign of someone driven by emotion rather than training. As the battle raged, Edward's focus narrowed, his world reduced to the immediate threat before him. The bar's patrons watched from a safe distance, their expressions a mix of fear and fascination. The clashing of weapons echoed through the room, each strike a testament to Edward's resolve and the figure's desperation. Finally, with a calculated feint, Edward disarmed the figure, sending the laser sword clattering to the floor. He moved swiftly, pinning the figure against the wall, his weapon trained on them with unyielding precision. "Who sent you?" Edward demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The figure struggled for a moment before slumping in defeat, their hood falling back to reveal a young face marked by determination and fear. "Oh. I had no choice," they gasped, their voice laced with regret. "They threatened my family." Edward's grip on his weapon tightened, his mind racing with possibilities. The figure's words rang true, the desperation in their eyes unmistakable. He knew he had to make a decision, one that could alter the course of his quest for vengeance. Edward's grip on the weapon tightened as he studied the young figure before him. The desperation in their eyes tugged at something deep within him, a flicker of empathy that clashed with the cold resolve of his mission. He took a breath, deciding to play a dangerous game. "I'll spare you," Edward said, lowering his weapon slightly but keeping it ready. "But you need to earn that mercy. Tell me what you know about the conspiracy surrounding Alice's death." The figure's expression shifted from fear to cautious hope. "Oh. I can help you," they stammered, glancing around as if expecting someone to intervene. "I overheard something at the embassy. The diplomat was working with a faction that wanted to silence dissent. Alice was collateral damage in a power play." Edward's heart raced as he absorbed the information. "What faction? Who's behind this?" "The Syndicate," the figure replied, their voice trembling. "They control the black market, and they have connections in the highest levels of the Empire. They wanted to send a message, and Alice, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Edward's mind raced, processing the implications. The Syndicate was notorious for its ruthless tactics, and their involvement meant that the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. He needed to act quickly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still a liability. "Is there anything else?" Edward pressed, his voice low and steady. The figure swallowed hard, their eyes wide with fear. "I can help you get to Zenthra, I have contacts." Before they could finish, Edward made a decision. He couldn't allow any loose ends. The figure had already tried to kill him once, there was no guarantee they wouldn't turn on him again. In a swift motion, he raised his blaster and pulled the trigger, the energy bolt striking the figure squarely in the face. The bar erupted into chaos once more as the figure crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Edward's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of his actions settling heavily on his conscience. He had acted decisively, but at what cost? The faces of the patrons twisted in horror, their gasps echoing in the air. He turned on his heel, moving quickly through the throng of shocked onlookers. The bar was no longer a safe haven, it had become a beacon of danger. Edward knew he had to leave before the authorities arrived, before the Empire's enforcers caught wind of the chaos. As he stepped outside, the night air hit him like a wave, the coolness grounding him in reality. He had made his choice, and now he had to face the consequences. The path to Zenthra awaited, and he would not be deterred. But as he moved through the streets, a sense of unease settled in his gut. The Syndicate would not take kindly to his interference, and they would come for him. He needed a plan, allies, and information, all while navigating the treacherous waters that lay ahead. Edward slipped into the shadows of the night, his heart still racing from the confrontation in the bar. He needed a place to regroup, to think, and to plan his next move. The safe house was an unassuming residence on the outskirts of Valtoria, a relic from his days in the Special Forces. It was equipped with hidden compartments and surveillance systems, perfect for his current needs. Once inside, he secured the doors and activated the security protocols. The familiar whir of machinery offering him a sense of comfort. The dimly lit room was sparse, but it was all he needed. He set up a makeshift workstation, pulling out his communicator and accessing the black market network he had once frequented. Days turned into nights as Edward immersed himself in gathering information about the Syndicate. He navigated through encrypted channels, piecing together intel from various sources, informants, traders, and mercenaries who operated in the shadows. The Syndicate's influence was vast, their operations sprawling across several planets, but Edward was relentless. In exchange for credits and favors, he acquired valuable information about the Syndicate's hierarchy, their key players, and their hideouts. The more he learned, the more he realized the depth of their corruption. They were not just criminals, they were a cancer within the Empire, manipulating events from behind the scenes. With the information flowing in, Edward also began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. He knew he would need weapons, powerful and reliable. He reached out to an old contact, a black market dealer named Kira, who specialized in advanced weaponry. After a few tense negotiations, he secured a cache of blasters, grenades, and even a few experimental devices that could turn the tide in a fight. As he continued to lay low, Edward also realized he needed a new identity. The Empire's watchful eyes would be searching for him, and he couldn't afford to be recognized. He contacted a hacker known for creating false identities, trading information for a clean slate. The hacker promised to deliver the new identity within a few days, complete with documentation and a backstory that would allow Edward to operate under the radar. Finally, he turned his attention to acquiring an automated starship. The old ship he had used before was too recognizable, and he needed something that could blend in with the fleet of vessels traversing the galaxy. Through the black market, he found a sleek, unmarked vessel that had been modified for stealth and speed. It was perfect for his needs, and after a tense exchange of credits, it was his. With his new weapons, identity, and starship secured, Edward felt a surge of confidence. He was ready to take the fight to the Syndicate, to expose their corruption, and to find those responsible for Alice's death. But he knew he had to be strategic. One misstep could cost him everything. As he prepared to leave the safe house, a sudden thought struck him. He needed to gather his resources and plan his approach carefully. The Syndicate would not go down without a fight, and he had to be ready for whatever they threw at him. As Edward settled into the cockpit of his newly acquired starship, a sense of purpose surged through him. The sleek vessel hummed to life, its systems coming online with a satisfying glow. He plotted the course to Zenthra, the coordinates flickering on the navigation screen, and took a moment to gather his thoughts. Zenthra was a planet steeped in mystery and ancient secrets, its archives rumored to hold the truth about the Syndicate's machinations and Alice's murder. He was ready to confront whatever awaited him there, determined to uncover the layers of deception that had cost him everything. The ship sliced through the stars, the vastness of space stretching out before him. Edward felt a thrill of exhilaration as he engaged the hyperdrive, the familiar rush of speed enveloping him. But the thrill was short-lived. Soon, an alarm blared, jolting him from his thoughts. "Warning, incoming vessels detected," the ship's AI announced, its voice calm yet urgent. Edward's heart raced as he glanced at the radar. 2 ships were closing in fast, Syndicate bounty hunters, no doubt alerted to his departure. They were relentless, and he had known this confrontation was inevitable. He quickly assessed his options, fingers dancing over the controls as he prepared for battle. "Time to show them what I've got," he muttered under his breath, flipping switches to engage the ship's weapons systems. The bounty hunters fired first, their blasters lighting up the void of space with deadly precision. Edward deftly maneuvered his ship, dodging their attacks as he returned fire. The asteroids scattered throughout the field became both a shield and a weapon, providing cover while also offering opportunities to strike. With a surge of adrenaline, Edward positioned his ship behind one of the larger asteroids, waiting for the perfect moment. As one of the bounty hunters broke formation to pursue him, he launched a well-aimed shot. The energy bolt struck true, slamming into the enemy ship with a brilliant explosion that lit up the darkness of space. The first ship disintegrated, debris scattering like fallen stars. Edward allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, but there was no time to celebrate. The second ship was still on his tail. The remaining bounty hunter, realizing the odds had shifted, quickly turned to flee, retreating into the depths of the asteroid field. Edward pursued for a moment, but he knew it was futile. The bounty hunter had escaped, likely to report his location to the syndicate. He had to focus on reaching Zenthra and finding the answers he sought. With the immediate danger past, Edward recalibrated his course, the planet Zenthra coming into view. Its surface was a tapestry of ancient ruins and lush greenery, a stark contrast to the cold void of space he had just navigated. He felt a sense of urgency as he prepared to land, knowing that time was of the essence. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, Edward's mind raced with possibilities. The archives awaited him, and with them, the potential to expose the syndicate's corruption and avenge his daughter. He had to be cautious. The syndicate would be on high alert now, and he couldn't afford any missteps. The ship touched down in a secluded area, the engines humming to a halt. Edward took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He was ready to delve into the mysteries of Zenthra, ready to confront the shadows of the past. Edward stepped out of his ship, the cool air of Zenthra brushing against his skin as he surveyed the area. He knew that the syndicate would not let his arrival go unpunished, especially after the encounter in space. Setting up a perimeter around his ship was not just a precaution, it was a necessity. He retrieved the weapons he had acquired from the black market, moving with purpose as he laid out his defenses. First, he activated the early warning sensors, placing them strategically around the landing site. These would alert him to any approaching threats, giving him precious moments to react. Next, he deployed the automated blaster turrets, positioning them to cover the most vulnerable angles. With a few quick adjustments, the turrets hummed to life, their targeting systems calibrating as they scanned the surroundings for movement. Edward felt a surge of satisfaction. He was turning his ship into a fortress. Finally, he carefully set up the incendiary mines, each equipped with a motion sensor trigger. He buried them partially in the ground, camouflaging them with rocks and foliage. They would serve as a last line of defense, capable of creating a devastating explosion if any enemies got too close. With the perimeter secured, Edward took a step back and surveyed his work. The ship was now a well-defended stronghold, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He had done everything he could to prepare for an ambush, but he knew that in this line of work, nothing was ever guaranteed. Now, it was time to gather information and uncover the truth about the syndicate's operations on Zenthra. He needed to find the archives and learn what they held regarding Alice's murder and the conspiracy that had ensnared him. As he turned to head toward the ruins rumored to house the archives, a sudden movement in the underbrush caught his attention. Edward's instincts flared, and he crouched low, ready to react. He couldn't afford to be complacent. The syndicate was always lurking in the shadows. Edward cautiously approached the underbrush, his senses heightened as he prepared for whatever threat might emerge. His hand rested on his blaster, ready to react at a moment's notice. However, as he parted the leaves, he was met not with a foe, but with a small noxer, a creature resembling a squirrel, its large, curious eyes blinking up at him. The noxer's fur shimmered in the dappled light, and it tilted its head, seemingly unafraid of the imposing figure before it. Edward let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, lowering his weapon. The noxer chattered softly, darting around his feet in a playful manner. It was a harmless creature, more interested in investigating Edward than posing any danger. He chuckled lightly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he watched the little creature scurry off into the underbrush. With a smile still lingering on his lips, Edward redirected his focus to the task at hand. The ancient archives awaited him, and he needed to find them quickly. He recalled the fragmented information he had gathered about their location, rumored to be hidden within the ruins of an ancient temple, shrouded in mystery and guarded by the remnants of a long-lost civilization. Determined, Edward set off toward the ruins, navigating through the dense foliage that surrounded him. The forest was alive with the sounds of alien wildlife, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flora. As he moved deeper into the wilderness, the path became less defined, overgrown with vines and roots that twisted like serpents. After what felt like hours of trekking, Edward finally caught sight of the temple in the distance. Its crumbling stone structure rose majestically from the ground, adorned with intricate carvings that hinted at its ancient origins. The sight filled him with a sense of awe and urgency. This place held the answers he sought, and he would not leave without them. As he approached the temple, the atmosphere shifted. A heavy silence enveloped the area, the only sound being the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Edward's instincts tingled with the awareness of danger. The syndicate would not take kindly to his intrusion. He pushed through the entrance, the air inside the temple cool and musty. Shadows danced across the walls, and the faint glow of bioluminescent fungi illuminated the path ahead. Edward moved cautiously, his senses alert for any signs of life, friend or foe. The deeper he ventured into the temple, the more he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Ancient texts and artifacts lay scattered among the debris, remnants of a civilization that had long since vanished. But it was the archives he needed, the repository of knowledge that could shed light on Alice's death. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Edward turned sharply, his heart racing, ready to confront whatever lurked in the shadows. Edward moved cautiously around the temple, his eyes scanning the crumbling stones and overgrown vines for any signs of hidden entrances or clues that could lead him to the archives. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and he could feel the weight of history pressing down on him as he navigated through the remnants of an ancient civilization. He brushed aside a tangle of vines, revealing a series of intricate carvings on the temple wall. The symbols depicted scenes of celestial beings, their forms intertwined with the elements, suggesting a connection to knowledge and power. Edward's heart raced. Perhaps these carvings were more than mere decoration. He studied them closely, searching for patterns or indications of a hidden passage. As he explored, he began to notice subtle shifts in the environment, the way the light filtered through cracks in the stone, the faint scent of damp earth mixed with something else, something metallic. He felt a prickle at the back of his neck, an instinctual warning that he was not alone. Unbeknownst to Edward, he was being watched. From the shadows of the temple, a pair of eyes followed his every move, observing him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The figure lurked just beyond the reach of light, hidden among the debris, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Edward continued his search, his focus unwavering. He knelt beside a pile of rubble, carefully moving stones aside. Just as he was about to give up hope, he noticed a slight indentation in the ground, a trapdoor, cleverly concealed beneath the debris. His heart raced with excitement as he cleared away the stones, revealing a heavy stone slab with ancient symbols etched into its surface. He pressed down on the slab, and to his surprise, it shifted slightly, revealing a narrow opening beneath. The passage was dark and foreboding, but it promised the answers he sought. Edward took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. As he prepared to descend into the dark passage, the watcher in the shadows shifted, their hand subtly moving towards a concealed weapon. They had seen enough. The intruder could not be allowed to uncover the secrets of the archives. Edward steeled himself as he descended into the dark passage, the musty air wrapping around him like a shroud. The faint glow of bioluminescent fungi illuminated the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with every step he took. His heart raced with anticipation. The archives were within reach, and he was determined to uncover the truth about Alice's murder. As he moved deeper into the passage, the atmosphere shifted. Edward could feel a presence behind him, a sense of being watched that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He had no doubt that someone was following him, and he needed to act quickly. With a swift motion, he activated a small device he had prepared earlier, a remote trigger for the incendiary mines he had set up as part of his perimeter defenses. He discreetly positioned it near the entrance of the passage, ensuring that it would be triggered if someone entered without his clearance. As he pressed on, the darkness enveloped him, and the air grew hotter, thick with the scent of ancient stone and decay. He could hear the faintest sound of footsteps behind him, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. Edward's instinct screamed that danger was imminent. Suddenly, he heard a rustle behind him, and without hesitation, he pressed the trigger. The incendiary mine erupted in a blaze of fire and light, the explosion reverberating through the passage. Edward turned just in time to see the figure of his would-be attacker, a shadowy silhouette, caught in the flames. The Watcher had followed him into the archives with the intent to kill, but their plan had backfired spectacularly. Edward watched as the flames consumed the figure, their desperate screams echoing in the confined space before abruptly cutting off. The heat washed over him, but he remained unharmed, the trap he had set working flawlessly. As the smoke began to clear, Edward felt a mix of triumph and sorrow. He had successfully defended himself, but the loss of life weighed heavily on his conscience. He had not wanted to kill, but the stakes were too high, and he could not afford any threats to his mission. With the passage now clear, Edward pressed forward, his resolve stronger than ever. The archives awaited him, and he needed to uncover the secrets that lay within. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him as he approached a large chamber at the end of the passage. The room opened up before him, filled with ancient scrolls, artifacts, and holographic displays that flickered with long-forgotten knowledge. Edward stepped inside, the air thick with the promise of answers. He moved quickly, scanning the shelves and tables for anything that could shed light on the Syndicate's involvement in Alice's death. As he searched, he couldn't shake the feeling that the secrets of Zenthara were more profound than he had anticipated. The truth was within his grasp, and he would stop at nothing to uncover it. As Edward sifted through the ancient scrolls, his hands trembling slightly with urgency, a nagging thought began to creep into his mind. He had come here seeking answers, desperate to uncover the truth behind Alice's murder and the Syndicate's involvement. But as he examined the intricate symbols and faded texts, a chilling realization took hold. What did these scrolls truly have to do with Alice? The more he read, the more he felt a dissonance, a disconnect between his quest for vengeance and the knowledge contained within these ancient writings. The scrolls spoke of ancient civilizations, lost knowledge, and cosmic truths, but there was no mention of the Syndicate or any connection to Ambassador through AK. Then it hit him like a cold wave crashing over him, it was all a setup. The Syndicate had been using him all along, exploiting his grief and his thirst for revenge to lead him to this very place. They had manipulated his emotions, drawing him in with the promise of answers, while all the time they were simply after the ancient knowledge that lay buried within the archives. He felt a surge of anger and betrayal wash over him. There had been no connection to the Ambassador or any conspiracy tied to Alice's death. The Syndicate had played him like a pawn on a chessboard, and he had walked right into their trap. Edward clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He would not be their pawn any longer. He needed to regroup, to think, and to find a way to turn the tables on the Syndicate. They had underestimated him, and now he would use their own game against them. With a newfound determination, Edward began to devise a plan. He would gather the scrolls, but not for the Syndicate's sake. He would use the knowledge within them to expose their corruption and reclaim his agency. The fight was far from over, it was just beginning. As Edward searched the dimly lit archives for a way to destroy the ancient knowledge contained within, a sense of urgency gripped him. He couldn't allow the Syndicate to exploit this treasure trove of information, it was far too dangerous in their hands. He rifled through the scrolls, looking for anything that could serve as an incendiary device or explosive, his mind racing with possibilities. Just as he found a small cache of volatile chemicals hidden within a compartment, the atmosphere shifted. A low, menacing growl echoed through the chamber, sending chills down his spine. Edward turned slowly, his heart pounding in his chest, and found himself face to face with 4 Syndicate assassins, tall, grey-skinned reptilian creatures known as Nordathri. The Nordathri were infamous across the galaxy, renowned for their lethal efficiency and cunning. Their scales glimmered in the dim light, and their eyes glinted with predatory intent. Edward's instincts kicked into overdrive, he had to act fast. The assassins advanced, their movements fluid and deliberate, each step a reminder of the deadly threat they posed. "You're a fool to think you could come here unchallenged," one of the Nordathri hissed, their voice a low rumble that reverberated through the chamber. "The Syndicate will not allow you to escape with what you've found." Edward gripped the volatile chemicals tightly, his mind racing for a plan. He had no intention of going down without a fight, but facing 4 assassins alone was a daunting prospect. He needed to buy time, to create an opening for escape or to set off the explosive device he had just discovered. With a surge of adrenaline, Edward prepared to confront the deadly beings, knowing that the outcome of this encounter could determine the fate of not just himself, but of the knowledge contained within the archives. Edward's heart raced as he quickly set the volatile chemicals to explode, his hands moving with practiced precision. He knew that this was his only chance to destroy the archives and take the Syndicate assassins with him. With a final glance at the advancing Nordathri, he activated the device and sprinted away, the countdown ticking ominously in his mind. The explosion rocked the chamber, a deafening roar that echoed through the ruins. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the ground, and Edward felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. Debris rained down around him as the walls of the archives crumbled, and in an instant, the floor gave way beneath him. He plummeted into darkness, the world above disappearing in a cacophony of sound. Edward braced himself for impact, but instead of crashing onto solid ground, he landed in a cold, rushing underground river. The force of the water swept him away, pulling him swiftly downstream and out of the ruins, the remnants of the archives collapsing behind him. As he floated along the river, Edward's mind raced with thoughts of the assassins. Had they survived the blast? He had no way of knowing, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. But the immediate danger was gone, and for now, he was alive. The current carried him through a winding tunnel, the darkness enveloping him as he navigated the underground waterways. After what felt like an eternity, the river opened up into a larger cavern, the sound of rushing water echoing off the walls. Edward managed to pull himself onto the bank, gasping for air as he lay on the cool, damp ground. He took a moment to collect himself, his heart still pounding from the adrenaline of the explosion and the harrowing escape. As he regained his bearings, he realized he was not far from where he had landed his starship. The forest loomed ahead, a dense thicket of trees and underbrush that would provide cover as he made his way back to safety. He had survived the encounter, but the fight was far from over. He needed to regroup, plan his next move, and determine how to confront the Syndicate without falling into their traps again. With a newfound sense of determination, Edward pushed himself to his feet, ready to navigate through the forest and reclaim his ship. The truth about Alice's death still awaited him, and he would not rest until he uncovered it. As Edward navigated through the dense forest, he remained vigilant, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs setting his instincts on high alert. The shadows seemed to dance around him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being hunted. He pushed forward, determined to reach his starship and escape the chaos that had engulfed Xanthara. Suddenly, the tranquility of the forest was shattered by a series of explosions in the distance. The sound reverberated through the trees, sending birds flapping into the sky in a flurry of feathers. Edward's heart sank as he realized what it was, his incendiary mines. The Nordathra must have triggered them, and he could only hope they had been caught in the blast. He quickened his pace, adrenaline surging through him as he moved closer to the source of the explosions. Each detonation echoed in his mind, a reminder of the danger that still lurked within the shadows. Edward's thoughts raced, he needed to reach his ship before the Syndicate regrouped and sent more assassins after him. As he approached the clearing where he had landed his starship, the smoke from the explosions began to drift through the trees. Edward's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of anxiety and determination driving him forward. He peered through the underbrush, scanning the area for any signs of movement. The clearing came into view, and Edward's breath caught in his throat. His starship stood intact, but the ground around it was scorched, evidence of the chaos that had unfolded. He could see the remnants of the traps he had set, now scattered and charred. But there was no sign of the Nordathri, at least, none that he could see. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. The explosions had likely drawn attention, and he needed to act quickly. The Syndicate would be on high alert, and he couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. Edward's heart raced as he sprinted toward his starship, determination fueling his every step. The familiar hum of the ship's systems beckoned him, a promise of safety and escape. But as he reached the entrance and stepped inside, a chilling sight stopped him in his tracks. A trail of deep purple blood stained the floor, leading into the ship. The metallic scent mingled with a sharp, sulfuric odor, sending alarm bells ringing in Edward's mind. He followed the trail cautiously, his instincts screaming that something was very wrong. The bloody handprints smeared along the walls only heightened his unease, leading him toward the cargo hold. He approached the cargo hold door, his hand hovering over the control panel. The blood was fresh, and the presence of the Nordathri, whether dead or alive, was a stark reminder that danger had followed him aboard his ship. He had to decide quickly, the Syndicate could already be closing in. Taking a deep breath, Edward prepared himself for whatever lay beyond the door. He had come too far to let fear hold him back. He needed answers, and he needed to know if the assassins had survived the blast. Edward quickly activated the ship's security system, locking down the area around the cargo hold. The metallic whir of the mechanisms echoed through the ship, sealing off any potential escape routes for whatever might be lurking inside. He felt a surge of relief, knowing that he had bought himself a little more time to figure out the situation. With the cargo hold secured, Edward turned on his heel and made his way to the bridge. He needed to get the ship ready for takeoff, to escape Zenthara before more Syndicate assassins could close in on him. The urgency of the situation propelled him forward, each step filled with determination. As he reached the bridge, he quickly initiated the pre-flight sequence, the familiar hum of the ship's systems coming to life around him. He glanced at the monitors, checking for any signs of incoming threats. The explosions from earlier had likely drawn attention, and he needed to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. As the ship's engines warmed up, Edward couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The blood trail and the handprints had left a haunting impression on him. What had happened in his cargo hold? And how had a Nort Arthur made it aboard his ship? Just as he was about to engage the thrusters, the ship's sensors detected movement outside. Edward's heart raced as he peered out the viewport, scanning the surrounding area for any signs of danger. He could see shadows moving in the underbrush, and the realization hit him, he was not alone. Edward's heart raced as he activated the ship's weapon systems, the familiar hum of energy coursing through the ship as he prepared for potential combat. His targeting systems powered up, scanning the area outside for any signs of threats. Just as he focused on the monitors, a massive shape emerged from the tree line. A giant Drancuir, Zenthara's apex predator, poked its serpentine head into view. The creature's scales shimmered like a pearly mirror, blending seamlessly with its surroundings, making it almost invisible amidst the foliage. Edward's breath caught in his throat. He had heard tales of the Drancuir, but seeing one up close was a different experience entirely. The massive serpent was blind, relying on sound and smell to hunt. The explosions from earlier, combined with the scent of burning Nort Arthur flesh, had likely drawn it to the area. Edward knew he had to act quickly. The last thing he needed was to become prey to this formidable creature. He had a choice to make: should he attempt to scare the Drancuir away with the ship's weapons or prepare for a more strategic approach. The creature was dangerous, and Edward had to be cautious. Edward's instincts kicked into high gear as he prepared to engage the Drancuir directly. He knew that this apex predator would not hesitate to attack if it sensed an opportunity, and he had to be ready to defend himself. The ship's defenses were designed for combat, and he intended to use every advantage he had. He activated the ship's weapons systems fully, the targeting reticle locking onto the massive serpent as it slithered closer. The Drancuir's scales shimmered ominously, but Edward focused on the task at hand, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He couldn't afford to show fear, he had to assert dominance in this encounter. With a deep breath, he fired a warning shot, the energy bolt streaking through the air and striking the ground near the creature. The Drancuir recoiled, its head darting back as it hissed, the sound reverberating through the forest. Edward quickly adjusted his aim, ready to fire again if necessary. The serpent's massive body coiled, and it began to move with surprising speed, its blind form relying on the vibrations in the air to track him. Edward could see the raw power of the creature as it lunged toward the ship, its jaws wide open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Not today!" Edward shouted, firing another shot, this time hitting the creature squarely in the side. The Drancuir let out a deafening roar, the sound echoing through the trees as it writhed in pain. The shimmering scales reflected the energy from the blast, creating a dazzling display that momentarily blinded Edward. But the creature was not deterred. It continued its advance, and Edward knew he had to act fast. He engaged the ship's defensive shields, bracing for impact as the Drancuir lunged at him once more. The air crackled with tension as the predator and prey faced off in a deadly dance. Edward's mind raced, calculating his next move. He couldn't let the creature breach the ship, he had to find a way to either incapacitate it or drive it away. Edward quickly activated the sonic deterrent, a device designed to emit high-frequency sounds that would disorient and repel creatures like the Drancuir. He knew that the creature relied heavily on its acute sense of hearing, and this would be his best chance to drive it away without causing further harm. With a swift motion, he pressed the activation button, and the ship filled with a low, pulsating hum that escalated into a piercing frequency. The sound waves rippled through the air, vibrating the very walls of the ship. Edward watched as the Drancular recoiled, its head thrashing back and forth in confusion, the shimmering scales reflecting the chaos of light. The creature let out a furious hiss, but the sonic waves overwhelmed its senses. It writhed in discomfort, and Edward seized the opportunity. He engaged the ship's thrusters, lifting off the ground and ascending into the sky. The Drancular, disoriented by the sound, slithered away into the forest, seeking refuge from the relentless noise. As Edward broke through the treetops, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The ship's systems hummed smoothly, and he was finally free from the immediate threat. He had successfully evaded the Drancular and survived the chaos of Zenthra. But as he soared into the open sky, he knew the Syndicate was still out there, waiting for their chance to strike. With a steady hand, Edward plotted a course away from Zenthra, determined to regroup and reassess his next move. He needed to find allies and gather more information about the Syndicate's plans. The fight was far from over, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the ship's autopilot engaged, Edward leaned back in his seat, allowing the vessel to navigate through the stars toward Deep Space Station 17. The familiar hum of the engines filled the cockpit, but a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. He needed to check the cargo hold. Was there a Syndicate assassin on board, and were they still alive? With a deep breath, Edward rose from his seat and made his way to the cargo hold. The ship felt eerily quiet as he approached the door, and he prepared himself for whatever he might find inside. The blood trail and handprints had left him uneasy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that danger could still lurk within the confines of his ship. As he stepped into the cargo hold, the dim lighting illuminated the area, revealing the remnants of the chaos that had unfolded. The space was cluttered with crates and supplies, but the most pressing concern was the locked area where he had secured the Nord-Arthri assassin. He approached the reinforced door, his heart pounding in his chest. With a swift motion, he activated the controls to unlock it, the mechanisms whirring as the door slid open. Edward peered inside, ready to confront whatever lay within. To his surprise, the cargo hold was empty, except for the bloodstains and the remnants of the struggle. The assassin was gone. Panic surged through him as he scanned the area, searching for any signs of a struggle or an escape route. Had they managed to slip away during the chaos, or was there something more sinister at play? Just as he was about to turn back, a low growl echoed from the shadows of the cargo hold. Edward's instincts kicked in, and he prepared for a confrontation, knowing that he had to remain vigilant. Edward's voice echoed through the cargo hold as he called out, demanding to know if anyone was there. The silence hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, it felt as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a Nord-Arthri, limping painfully into the dim light. Edward's heart raced as he took in the sight. The creature's reptilian body was a patchwork of injuries, with burns covering over half of its scales, the flesh charred and raw. Its left arm was missing from the elbow down, and makeshift bandages, stained with blood, wrapped around the bloody stump where its limb once was. The creature's eyes, filled with a mix of pain and defiance, locked onto Edward's. Why are you still alive?" the Nord-Arthri hissed, its voice a strained whisper. "You should have finished me." Edward's mind raced. This was the assassin he had encountered earlier, but now it was a mere shadow of its former self. The injuries it bore were severe, and he could sense a mixture of vulnerability and rage emanating from the creature. "You're in no condition to fight," Edward replied cautiously, keeping his weapon trained on the Nord-Arthri. "What happened to you?" "The explosion." "I was caught in it," the creature spat, its breath labored. "But I am not finished yet. The Syndicate will not let you go unpunished for what you did." Edward felt a surge of conflicted emotions. Here was a creature that had tried to kill him, yet now it was broken and vulnerable. He could choose to finish the job, or he could consider an alternative. Edward lowered his weapon, recognizing the precarious situation the Nord-Arthri was in. "Listen, I can help you," he offered, trying to appeal to whatever sense of survival the creature had left. "If you cooperate, you might find a way out of this." The Nord-Arthri let out a harsh, rasping laugh, its eyes glinting with a mix of madness and defiance. "You think I would trust a human? You're a fool." With a sudden surge of desperation, the creature gathered its remaining strength and lunged toward the control panel for the cargo bay doors. Before Edward could react, the Nord-Arthri hit the release and the doors swung open with a hiss. The vacuum of space rushed in, creating a deafening roar as half of the ship's cargo was sucked out into the void. Edward was knocked to the floor, the sudden decompression throwing him off balance. He struggled to grasp onto something solid as the air whooshed around him. In an instant, the Nord R3 was pulled toward the opening, its body flailing helplessly as it was ejected into the cold emptiness of space. The ship's security fields activated just in time, sealing the cargo bay and preventing Edward from being pulled out as well. He lay on the floor, breathless and shocked, staring at the now closed doors. The Nord R3 would rather die in the vacuum of space than betray its syndicate allies. Anger and frustration surged through Edward as he pushed himself up from the floor, realizing that he had lost a potential source of information and that the syndicate's grip on him was still very much alive. He needed to regroup and rethink his strategy. The encounter had spiraled out of control, but he was still determined to uncover the truth and take the fight to the syndicate. Edward made his way to the bridge, the ship's systems humming softly around him as he navigated the familiar corridors. The encounter with the Nord R3 had shaken him, and he needed to refocus. With nearly 4 hours until he reached Deep Space Station 17, he had time to plan his next steps. As he settled into the captain's chair, he pulled up the ship's navigation systems and confirmed their course. The stars streaked by outside the viewport, a reminder of the vastness of space and the dangers that lurked within it. He realized he not only needed more intel on the syndicate but also a chance to resupply and lay low for a while. He accessed the ship's database, scanning for any information on the best places to resupply at Deep Space Station 17. The station was known for its bustling trade routes and a variety of merchants, some of whom had connections to the black market. It could provide him with weapons, supplies, and perhaps even allies willing to help him in his fight against the syndicate. With his course set and plans forming in his mind, Edward took a moment to gather his thoughts. He needed to be strategic, the syndicate was likely still hunting him, and he had to be prepared for whatever lay ahead. Edward turned his attention to the ship's inventory system, pulling up a detailed list of supplies and equipment currently aboard. The screen illuminated with various categories, and he began to assess what he had and what he would need for his upcoming mission at Deep Space Station 17. Weapons. 2 standard blasters, 1 in good condition, 1 needing repairs. 1 experimental energy grenade, highly volatile. 1 sonic deterrent, used recently, still operational. Medical supplies. Basic first aid kit, limited supplies left. 2 healing stimulants, effective but not enough for severe injuries. Food and water. Enough rations for 2 days. 3 water purification tablets, limited. Miscellaneous. Various tools for ship repairs. A few spare parts, not enough for major repairs. 1 data pad with encrypted information, unknown content. As Edward reviewed the inventory, it became clear that he was running low on critical supplies. He needed more weapons to defend himself against the syndicate, medical supplies in case of injury, and food and water for sustenance during his travels. He noted the items he would need to acquire at the station, additional weapons, medical supplies, and perhaps some food rations to ensure he could lay low for a while without worrying about running out of essentials. With a clearer picture of his needs, Edward felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would not only gather intel but also ensure he was well equipped for the challenges ahead. As Edward approached Deep Space Station 17, he activated the ship's stealth system, the vessel becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of the stars. The hum of the engines faded into a whisper as he navigated through the bustling traffic of ships coming and going from the station. He couldn't afford any unwanted detection, the syndicate's reach was long, and he needed every advantage he could muster. Once he docked at his contact's private bay, he quickly disembarked, his senses heightened as he stepped onto the station's metallic surface. The air was filled with the sounds of commerce, vendors hawking their wares, the chatter of travelers, and the distant hum of machinery. It was a world of opportunity and danger, and Edward had to tread carefully. His contact was waiting for him, a wiry figure with a knowing look in their eyes. "Edward," they said, nodding in greeting. "I've received your message. Supplies are ready, but there's something you need to know." Edward's heart raced as he listened intently. "What is it?" "Ambassador Talk is on the station," the contact replied, their voice low. "The same diplomat who was involved in your daughter's death. He's here for a meeting with some influential syndicate members." Edward's mind raced with the implications. This was an opportunity, a chance to confront the man who had played a key role in Alice's murder and to gather information on the syndicate's leadership. He could kill two birds with one stone. Where can I find him? Edward asked, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He's likely at the syndicate's meeting hall, but be careful, security will be tight. If you want to get to him, you'll need a plan. Edward nodded, determination settling over him like armor. He had a chance to take action, to seek justice not just for Alice but for all those wronged by the syndicate. Edward took a moment to gather his thoughts, knowing that patience would be key in his quest for vengeance. I need more intel before I make my move, he said to his contact, determination in his voice. I want to look Torque in the eyes when I kill him, but I know I have to plan accordingly. His contact nodded, understanding the gravity of Edward's mission. Torque will be on the station for 3 standard days before his shuttle departs. That gives you some time to observe him, learn his routines, and find the best opportunity to strike. Edward felt a surge of relief at the information. 3 days would allow him to watch and wait, to carefully plot his approach. He could gather intel on Torque's security detail, the layout of the meeting hall, and any potential escape routes. The more he knew, the greater his chances of success. Keep an eye on the syndicate's movements as well, his contact advised. They'll be on high alert with Torque in town. If you can create a distraction, it might give you the opening you need. With a plan forming in his mind, Edward thanked his contact and moved to a vantage point where he could observe the meeting hall from a distance. He settled in, watching as various figures entered and exited, noting the security presence and the interactions between the syndicate members. As the hours passed, Edward remained focused, his mind sharp and alert. He knew that the wait would be worth it. Every moment spent gathering intel was a step closer to avenging Alice's death. Edward's mind raced with ideas as he formulated a plan to create a distraction that would draw security away from Ambassador Torque. He needed to generate enough chaos to slip past the guards and get close to Torque without raising suspicion. He took a moment to survey the area surrounding the meeting hall, noting the various vendors, the bustling crowd, and the potential for mischief. There were plenty of opportunities to create a scene that would divert attention. After careful consideration, Edward decided to cause a commotion near one of the vendor stalls, where a shipment of volatile goods was being unloaded. If he could set off a small explosion or cause a ruckus, it would likely send security rushing to investigate, leaving Torque vulnerable. With a plan in mind, Edward moved stealthily through the crowd, gathering the materials he needed to create the distraction. He found some flammable substances among the vendors' goods, and with a few quick adjustments, he rigged them to ignite with a spark. Once everything was in place, he took a deep breath, ready to execute his plan. The chaos would provide him with the perfect opportunity to confront Torque while he was momentarily unguarded. Edward remained vigilant, his eyes locked on the entrance to the meeting hall as he waited for the right moment to set off the distraction. He needed to time it perfectly, ensuring that Torque was present and that civilian casualties were kept to a minimum. The crowd bustled around him, oblivious to the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. Finally, he spotted Ambassador Torque exiting the hall, flanked by his security detail. Edward's heart raced as he recognized that this was the moment he had been waiting for. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and activated the ignition device for the flammable materials he had set up near the vendor stall. In an instant, flames erupted, sending a plume of smoke and chaos into the air. The explosion was loud enough to draw the attention of everyone nearby, and the crowd erupted into panic. Just as he had predicted, the security detail rushed toward the source of the commotion, leaving Torque momentarily unguarded. Seizing the opportunity, Edward slipped through the chaos and made his way toward the meeting hall, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He could see Torque standing there, momentarily stunned by the explosion, and Edward knew this was his chance to confront the man who had played a role in his daughter's death. As he approached, the world around him faded away, leaving only the singular focus of avenging Alice. He stepped into Torque's line of sight, the ambassador's eyes widening in shock as he recognized the threat before him. Edward Guinness, Torque stammered, backing away slightly. "What are you doing here?" Edward's voice was steady, filled with the weight of his purpose. "It's time for you to answer for what you've done." Edward leveled the blaster at Ambassador Torque, his finger poised on the trigger. The chaos around them intensified, the sounds of panic and confusion echoing through the station. The Aarakocra ambassador stood stunned, his vulture-like head swiveling in shock as he processed the sight of Commander Guinness, a figure he had underestimated until now. Please. Torque raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, his voice trembling with fear. You don't understand. She made me do it. She threatened my hatchlings if I didn't help her. The desperation in his voice was palpable, and Edward could see the genuine fear in Torque's eyes. Edward's grip on the blaster tightened, his mind racing. The ambassador's words struck a chord, but he couldn't let sympathy cloud his judgment. Torque had played a role in the conspiracy that had led to Alice's death, and he needed to ensure that justice was served. Who threatened your hatchlings, Torque? Edward demanded, his voice cold and unwavering. Tell me everything you know about the syndicate and their plans. Torque's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but he knew he was cornered. I'll tell you. Just please, spare my life. The syndicate, they have powerful allies. I was just a pawn in their game. Edward's resolve hardened. He needed to extract the truth, but he had to be careful. The ambassador's fear could either be a path to valuable information or a desperate ploy to save himself. Edward's eyes narrowed as he pressed Torque for a name, ready to extract every ounce of information he could. Who specifically threatened your hatchlings? I need a name, he demanded, his voice firm and unwavering. But before Torque could respond, the sharp crack of a magnetic slug thrower shattered the air. The sound was deafening, and Edward's instincts kicked in as he turned just in time to see the blast strike Torque in the side of the head. The impact was brutal, blood, feathers, and grey matter exploded in a gruesome display, splattering across the walls and showering Edward in the aftermath. Stunned, Edward stumbled back, his heart racing as he processed what had just happened. The ambassador's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, leaving Edward standing amidst the chaos, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. He had lost his chance to extract valuable information, and now he was left with more questions than answers. The chaos around him intensified, the sounds of panic and confusion growing louder. Edward's mind raced as he realized he needed to act quickly. He could still find a way to gather intel on the syndicate, but he had to be cautious, the shooter could still be nearby. Edward's instincts kicked into overdrive as he scanned the area for the source of the shot. His heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he focused on the chaos unfolding around him. People were screaming and running in all directions, but he needed to cut through the panic and find the shooter. He moved cautiously, using the bodies and debris for cover as he peered into the crowd. His eyes darted from one person to another, searching for any sign of the gunman. The shooter had to be close, and he couldn't afford to let them escape. As he maneuvered through the chaos, Edward caught a glimpse of movement near the edge of the crowd. A figure was slipping away, their silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of panic. Without hesitation, Edward followed, his determination driving him forward. He pushed through the throng of people, keeping his gaze locked on the figure. Just as he was about to close the distance, the shooter turned a corner and vanished down a narrow alleyway. Edward quickened his pace, knowing this was his chance to catch whoever had just disrupted his plans. As he entered the alley, he felt the weight of the moment bearing down on him. He had to confront this threat head-on, the syndicate's web of deception was still intact, and he needed to unravel it. Edward's heart raced as he called out to the figure, his voice echoing in the narrow alley. Stop. Identify yourself. From the shadows, a calm voice replied, I'm sorry, Father, but I can't. You were never meant to be involved, but now I can't allow you to live. Edward froze, the words hitting him like a physical blow. Alice, he breathed, disbelief washing over him. The shadows shifted slightly, revealing a familiar silhouette, a figure he had mourned, a daughter he had lost. Alice, is it really you? He asked, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and confusion. How is this possible? The figure stepped into the dim light, and Edward's heart sank at the sight of her. Alice looked different, her once bright eyes now shadowed with pain and a hardened resolve. The memories of their time together flooded back, but they were overshadowed by the reality of the moment. I had to do this, Father, she said, her voice steady but filled with an underlying sorrow. You don't understand the danger you're in. The syndicate is more powerful than you can imagine, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Then help me, Edward pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. We can expose them together. We can find out the truth about your death. Alice shook her head, a pained expression crossing her face. You don't know what you're asking. I can't let you interfere. You were supposed to stay away. Edward's mind raced as he processed her words. He had come so far, and now he faced the unimaginable, his daughter, alive but seemingly aligned with the very forces he sought to destroy. "Why, Alice? Why have you aligned yourself with the Syndicate?" Edward's voice trembled with a mix of anger and desperation, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Alice stepped forward, her expression a blend of defiance and sorrow. "Because I am the Syndicate, Father. I'm the one calling all the shots, manipulating the diplomats, running the black market. I faked my death to protect you and your honor." The words hit Edward like a physical blow. He staggered back, his mind racing to comprehend the reality before him. His own daughter, a crime lord. It was unfathomable. He dropped to his knees, the ground feeling unsteady beneath him as disbelief washed over him. "No, this can't be true," he whispered, shaking his head. "You were just a child. I wanted to protect you from all of this." Alice's eyes softened for a moment, but the resolve remained. "I had to take control, Father. The Syndicate is powerful, and they would have destroyed everything you stood for. I did what I had to do to survive and to keep you safe." Edward felt a torrent of emotions: betrayal, heartbreak, anger. The very thought that Alice had been living a life of crime, orchestrating the very chaos he had fought against, was almost too much to bear. "You could have come to me. We could have fought this together." "I couldn't risk it," she replied, her voice firm yet filled with pain. "You would have been a target. I had to make choices, hard choices, to protect what's left of our family. But now, you're here, and I can't let you ruin everything I've built." Edward's heart ached at the sight of his daughter, caught in a web of her own making. He had to decide how to respond to this revelation, knowing that the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. Edward knelt in disbelief, grappling with the reality that his daughter had become the very thing he had fought against. The weight of her confession pressed down on him like a crushing force. He had lost her once, only to find her again as the architect of chaos. The anger and betrayal coursed through his veins, but beneath it all was a deep sorrow for the choices she had made. "Alice," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't have to do this. We can find a way to dismantle the Syndicate together. You don't have to be alone in this." Alice's expression hardened, the flicker of vulnerability extinguished. "You don't understand, Father. This is my life now. I have power, control. If I walk away, I lose everything, and so do you." Edward felt a pang of desperation, wishing he could reach her, to pull her back from the edge. "You've lost your way. This isn't the path I wanted for you. You can still change." But Alice shook her head, stepping back into the shadows. "You don't know what you're asking. I can't let you ruin everything I've built. You need to leave. Now." As Edward watched her retreat into the darkness, he felt a profound sense of loss. The daughter he had known was gone, replaced by a figure shrouded in power and deception. He stood there, torn between the desire to save her and the realization that she had chosen her path. With a heavy heart, he turned away, knowing he had to leave the station and regroup. The fight against the Syndicate was far from over, but now it was more complicated than ever. He would find a way to expose their corruption, even if it meant confronting Alice again in the future. As he made his way back to his ship, Edward felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. The universe was vast, and the battle for justice was just beginning. Hello and thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. This story was 90% AI generated, the 10% I was a part of was picking and describing the plot twists. I used https://app.fable.ai to generate the story and https://lovevoice.com to narrate it. Links below. If you enjoyed it and would like me to make more videos like this one, please comment down below. Thank you once again, and have a nice day.